Hello and welcome to another episode of Econ and Decon. I appreciate you joining me. If you've been following along, we've just wrapped up a series on inflation and deflation, where they come from, how to understand it, those kinds of things. But the number one feedback I have gotten on this channel is that a lot of the information is pissing people off.
Let the hate flow through you.
Or it's a little depressing. It makes people feel a little bit powerless in a way that they're being taken advantage of by powers that are generally beyond their control. So today, to put a bow on the inflation-deflation conversation before we move on to bigger and brighter topics, is what can we do about it? What can you do about it? So this video is really going to be split into two parts. The first part is what can we do about it as a society, as a collective, as voters? What can be done to change the system so that our currency isn't being devalued into nothing? The second part of this video is what can you do? What can you do in your own life to help protect your family and to help save the value of your savings and investments? And if you have a high enough risk tolerance, maybe even make some real money in the process. And if you stick around to the end, I will get into the one thing that I think is a very good investment right now. Now, this is not investment advice. Nothing on this channel is, nothing in this episode is. That's not my role. I'm just trying to give people a better understanding for what sorts of things people look to when they're trying to combat this issue. What sorts of things are the richest people among us doing in order to try to protect the value of their assets? But before we get into all that, let's take a moment and share a message from one of our sponsors, White Dudes for Harris.
Your diet iced tea, senor?
Not right now, Pino.
Kamala Harris.
We have defended the honor of our planet, battled villains throughout the universe, and dabbled in photography. What more can we achieve?
It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day.
Some brave white dudes right there. So let's get into it, shall we? What can we do? Now, number one is end the Federal Reserve. If you've watched this channel since the beginning, my second video was on the Federal Reserve. Go check it out now. But this is a poisonous institution that was created by some of the richest, greediest people in the country to serve their own interests. The Federal Reserve is the mechanism by which this inflation is allowed to continue. This bank represents a power over you and your bank account and the value of your savings that otherwise would not exist. Absent a central bank, this power over you would not exist. That power instead would be in your hands. It would be dispersed to all of the individuals throughout the country. This is the first and most important step. Remember, Vladimir Lenin said the establishment of a central bank is the most important step to socializing a nation. This is why. Think of the most evil government policy you can think of, whether it's some spending program or some war overseas or CIA meddling. All of it is only possible because the government essentially has a blank check through the Federal Reserve. It can create as much money as it wants for every pet project that every politician trying to win office promises. Every bad thing the government has done over the last 100 years is only possible because of the Federal Reserve, and this power didn't exist until 1913. Our fastest period of growth happened without it. We do not need this. This is an organization that was started by the most powerful, richest banking interests in the country for the exclusive purpose of benefiting them at your expense. This entire house of cards is not possible without the Federal Reserve. Thomas Massie has recently put an End the Fed bill into Congress. He's got something like 24 co-signers. This is something we need to talk about more. This is something we need to vote based on. This is something we need to pressure politicians towards doing, because the truth is that the vast majority of politicians in Congress is really the one that would have to do it. The vast majority of the members of Congress don't know the things that are presented in this Federal Reserve video I did a few videos ago. This is not common knowledge. Most people don't care about it, or they think it's so complicated they couldn't possibly understand it. It's not. So we just need pressure. We need education. We need to vote for people who make this an issue. It's not an easy route, but it would be the biggest single thing we could do. Number two is stop spending. A lot of people think that the measure of a government's drag on the economy is taxes. It's not. The measure of the government's drag on the economy is spending. When we spend more than we tax, when we spend more money than we take in, what a lot of people like to say is that this creates new savings and it adds to the total savings of the population. This is a half-truth, because what it also does is create new debt. It creates new liability. It pulls demand forward. It The government does things it can't afford to do, and it does it by pulling forward money from your children and grandchildren. That's what bonds are. When the government goes into debt, that's what it's doing. The government is borrowing from you and spending that money, presumably into the economy, and then you're getting interest and you're getting some money, sure. But that is also a liability that will be paid back by your children. So many decades of spending, of deficit spending, many decades of going further into debt is pulling forward future demand.
What is this? What is this? Where's all the money?
That's as good as money, sir. Those are IOUs.
That's why in the short term, some of these spending programs can have noticeable effects. Some of these spending programs can up the savings rate. Some of these spending programs can help in the short term, but all they're doing is blowing a bigger bubble that your children are going to have to pop. This is what we're seeing right now, is we're seeing 60 years of out of control spending that has been completely financed through debt. And every time we have a little bump in the road, the government has to create a bunch new money to paper over that. But it is all the result of deficit spending. It is a direct result of the huge spending and the huge debt that the government has taken on. And the only way to cover it up is with the Federal Reserve or with other bond buyers coming in and papering it over with newly created money. You cannot stop the inflation if you do not stop the Treasury from spending every dollar you make and more in every country on earth. We have to stop spending. It is hurting poor people and it is hurting your children. Spending is the problem. The last thing we can do is what this channel's about. It's education. People aren't talking about the Federal Reserve. People aren't talking about the fact that inflation is a policy. People just associate inflation with growth because they don't know any better. People have to understand these things. That's what this channel is about. This is the long way. That's the truth. There's no easy fix. It starts with conversations. It starts with getting the information out there. It starts with empirical data. It starts with getting yourself into the debate, because most of the ideas discussed on this channel will not be allowed in debates. And the only time they ever were was when Ron Paul ran for president in 2008 and 2012. Go back and watch those debates right now and watch how he was right about everything he said. That's why people who make these points are typically not allowed on debate stages. An informed populace is harder to defraud.
You know, not too long ago, there was a poll done where I was up against Obama, and I was equal to Romney in that. So
does it
we have a
bug you,
lot of
though,
support from
Congressman?
independents
I agree.
and Democrats.
You've been a remarkable phenomenon. But
I mean, if you look, somebody told me, you know, from this last debate, I thought I did rather well. And they went down the number of times they mentioned the other three candidates in the review of the debate. And it was, you know, like 80, 90 times, depending on which it was. I was mentioned one time in all the discussion of the debate after it was over.
Right.
Now, you might argue I didn't win, or some people argue that I did.
You had the juice.
But it deserved more than one mention on all the stations. Somebody went and added these all up.
Thank you, Congressman.
So what's going on here? You're in this media business. I'd like to know exactly how that comes up.
All of these power centers that we've talked about, sure, they have huge power, but it is given to them by you and by the people around you. Education, spreading the word. Stop talking about these culture war issues. Stop going back and forth, red team versus blue team, and raising your flag and talking about how stupid the other side is. The other side isn't the problem. The people who are pulling the wool over our eyes is the problem. The people who are benefiting from our division are the problem. The only solution is education. That's what this channel is about, but it starts with you. It is a long game, but it is everybody in their everyday lives. It is people talking to the people that they know, sharing the information they need, like this channel. Things like that are going to win the war in the long term. The only way out of ignorance is through education. And no powerful group is going to give you the information you need to overthrow them.
Son of a... You done messed up, Aaron!
No group in control of the education of your children is going to teach them what we're talking about on this channel. It's up to us. Sorry. Now let's move on to you individually. What can you do in your own personal life to protect your family and to protect the value of your savings from this inflationary environment? First is to buy assets, buy real assets. This is essentially what rich people do. If you have money in the bank, Don't go buy a car. A car is an expense, okay? Buy a house or buy some stock. So what stock is partial ownership in a company. That doesn't mean all stocks are good. That doesn't mean now is a good time to enter the stock market. Again, this is not financial advice, but I personally am a little worried at the time of the filming of this video at the end of July 2024 about what the stock market might do in the short term. So I'm not saying jump into it right now, but what people with a lot of money in their pocket do is they go buy ownership in companies through the stock market, and they buy real assets like houses and land. Again, houses are in the same boat a little bit. They've kind of topped, plateaued. Interest rates are high. I am not telling you that right now is the best time to buy a home. But what I am saying is that over time in an inflationary environment, these are some of the biggest moves that rich people make with their money, because both of these things, even disregarding the fake CPI number, real estate and the stock market typically outperform inflation. They typically go up faster than inflation does. Timing is important, not at all times. But over time, over a long period of time, they typically do. And this is, if you have enough excess money in your pocket, this is how rich people spend it. It's a little bit risky. You have to get the timing right in case, you don't want to buy a freaking $3 million house in 2007, right? So I'm not telling you anything about timing right now, but buying homes and buying stocks are generally good places to put your money if you can just sit on it, if you have a nest egg that you can just put away. These are ways that you can outpace inflation potentially, but they're risky. Next, let's talk about gold and silver. Gold and silver are not like the stock market or like real estate. Those things are investments that you hope grow. Gold and silver are money. Gold especially. If you look at central banks, they all hold huge amounts of gold. There's always a market to buy gold and silver. It is extremely liquid. Central banks own tons of gold because it's money.
The price of gold today is $1,580. The dollar during these last 3 years was devalued almost 50%. When you wake up in the morning, do you care about the price of gold?
Well, I pay attention to the price of gold, but I think it reflects a lot of things.
Do you think gold is money?
No.
It's not money. Even if it had been money for 6,000 years, somebody reversed that and eliminated that economic law.
Well, it's an asset. I mean, it's the same. Would you say Treasury bills are money? I don't think they're money either, but they're a financial asset.
Why do central banks hold it?
Well, it's a form of reserves.
Why don't they hold diamonds?
Well, it's tradition, long-term tradition.
In the last year, central banks, especially central banks like China and Russia, but many others, have been buying gold up at historic rates. I believe the reason is because the current economic system that the world runs on is beginning to fall apart, and something new is going to have to be come up with. And the people who are going to have the most power when this system falls apart are the people with the most gold. Again, that doesn't mean you're going to get rich off it. This is a store of value. I just don't want to lose what I've been able to squirrel away from my family. But when I say that gold is money, what I mean is when you look at the gold price, you're not really looking at what gold is worth. You're looking at it in dollar terms. So when the gold price goes up, that's actually not gold getting more valuable. That is the dollar typically getting less valuable. It's the dollar as a measuring stick is what's changing. Gold is not really changing. And to illustrate this point, let's look at what gold would have bought you in the time that the Federal Reserve was founded versus what gold would buy you today. The gold price when the Federal Reserve was founded in 1913 was $20.67. Today it's $2,380 about. In 1910, a pound of steak would cost you 17 cents. According to the U.S. Census Bureau. Today it costs you about $17 per pound. So the price of steak has gone up about 100 times. But remember, $20.67 all the way up to $23.80, gold has gone up more than 100 times. So in 1910, a pound of steak would cost you about 0.0082 ounces of gold. Today, a pound of steak would cost a little bit less than that, 0.0072 ounces of gold. In 1910, a car, specifically a Model T Ford, would cost you $825, again, according to the U.S. Census Bureau sources in the description. Today, an average car will cost you about $25,000. That means that in 1910, a Model T would cost you 40 ounces of gold. Today, a Honda Accord would cost you 10. 40 ounces would buy you a Porsche. You can go through everything from eggs to butter to fruits and vegetables, and all of them are over 100 times more expensive now, but actually less expensive in gold terms. This is what gold is. It's a store of value. It is money. This is why the central banks hold it.
I love gold!
Even when we look at houses, again, we've talked a lot on this channel and even earlier in this video about how real estate outpaces inflation. It outpaces the rest of the economy because it's a real asset, and that's what rich people get into. In 1915, the median home price in this country was $3,200. In September of 2023, that median home price was $412,000. Now, if we are conservative and call today's gold price $2,350, that means that in 1915, you needed about 154 ounces of gold to outright buy a house. And today, with a very conservative gold number, you need about 170 to 174 ounces of gold to buy the median house. So that's actually gone up a little bit in gold terms, but again, even in the fastest growing inflationary category, you've lost almost nothing in 100 years with gold. Silver, we haven't talked about very much, but it is essentially the same. The thing to worry about with silver is that silver is also an industrial metal. It's not just a money, it's not just a monetary metal, it's an industrial metal. So it's involved in everything from solar panels to cars to electronics. Silver, when there's a recession, when the economy goes down, silver, as the industrial metal part of silver, pulls it down. So silver can go way up, way faster than gold at times, but in times of recessions and economic downturns, like the one that's probably coming, silver can fall a little bit back because it's not just a monetary metal in the way that gold is. But over time, both of them really hold on to their value. They are metals that should be seen as replacement money. They are probably, they're not going to make you rich, but they are probably the most solid place to put your money in the long term if you just want to be safe and not lose it. Again, not investment advice, all right? Just a guy talking about things. Lastly, while we're on this topic, I'm going to contradict myself from the last video a little bit. If you remember the last video, I talked about how in times of inflation, people don't hoard things, and in times of deflation, people don't completely stop buying things. That's just not true. But it's not a terrible idea. I wouldn't be doing it right now, but the next time the government prints $10 trillion, maybe go buy some extra toothpaste. Now that you've watched all my videos and you have such a stellar understanding of inflation, you should be able to see it coming the next time there's a huge inflationary wave. The next time the government prints $10 trillion, it's a safe bet that everything is going to get more expensive, particularly things that involve imported products. So the truth is, most people don't think about it this way, but if you buy non-perishable things, if you even cans of food really, but toothpaste or, anything that you're going to need in 5 years, but it's going to be much more expensive in 5 years because of something coming down the pipe, what you're doing is getting a return on your investment. If you buy toothpaste right now and in 6 months it goes up 10%, so in 6 months you don't have to buy it, that is a 10% return on your investment in 6 months. Because now that money you were going to spend on toothpaste, you can spend on something else, and that toothpaste you got for a discount. This is not something, again, you're going to get rich off of. This is not something even like gold that's necessarily going to store your value, and it's not something that I would do right now for reasons that I'll get into in just a minute. But the next time the government prints a tremendous amount of money to try to dig itself out of a hole, this is a way to protect yourself at least a little bit. Take the money that you have now and try to buy some things before that money finds its way through the economy and they all explode in price like they have over the last few years. This is not, again, something you're going to get rich off of, but it is something that the average person can do. It's something that somebody with an extra $40 per paycheck can do if they see the signs and something like 2020 happens again. If you see this coming down the pipe, this is a way to at least protect yourself a little bit, because most of those things are going to get much more expensive. Now, in conclusion, the reason I wouldn't do that right now, the reason I wouldn't go out and buy a ton of toothpaste right now, is because we're at a bit of a crossroads. The next few years, things can go either way pretty hard. The analogy that I've heard is it's almost like tectonic plates and that are about to slip against each other. One of them's going to go under and one of them's going to go above, and it's a little too early to tell which one, but there's an earthquake coming. The debt that we have and the bubble that we have blown is going to go one of two ways. At some point, it's going to pop. And when it pops, it is going to be extremely deflationary. It tried to pop in 1998, it was a little bubble. Then it tried to pop with a bigger bubble in 2008, but they wouldn't let it either time. So in 2019, that bubble started popping again. And conveniently, COVID popped up, and all of a sudden the government had an excuse to print a ton of money that they kind of needed to print to paper over this bubble anyway. At some point, that bubble is going to burst. What's going to happen over the next few years is that these pressures are going to hit each other, and that bubble is going to try to burst. And either the government is going to let it, or they're not going to be able to stop it. It's just going to be too big this time. So if that pops, it is hugely deflationary. That is why I would not be placing huge bets on inflation going forward. At least not right now until we have more information. But the government, if they paper it over the next time it tries to start leaking, they'll have to print more money than they did during the pandemic. And inflation, the dam is going to break with inflation rather than deflation. This dam will break. These plates will slip. The answer is either going to be very big inflation again, or it's going to be catastrophic deflation. Huge deflation that most people won't expect because the government will just sit by and do nothing. Now, I don't expect that outcome. I expect them, because politicians are politicians, I think they're going to kick the can down the road as far as they can. I think to the extent that they think they can paper over it, they're going to try. But I am not sure how much farther this can be kicked down the road. Now, here's where we get into what I would do with my money. Now, again, not financial advice. This is not an investment channel. I am not a financial advisor. I'm just trying to give you ideas and tell you what I am thinking about with my money. What I would buy right now is undeveloped land. Because again, remember, we're going to go hard in one direction or the other, I believe. If that direction is inflation, if we have more of this debt coming due and they just try to paper over it, it's going to cause big inflation, in which case the value of that undeveloped land is going to go up significantly. But if the government and the Federal Reserve either can't paper over it or they choose not to, we're going to get huge deflation the other way. And if we get that, then the cost of developing that land plummets. Anybody who was around, especially if you were an adult in 2008, 2009, 2010, you know that the price for contractors and home builders was a fraction of what it was in 2006, 2007. Land protects you. Undeveloped land gives you a way to make money both in inflation and deflation. It is, from what I understand, it is the only investment you can make, or at least the best investment you can make, that sets you up well for either of those two outcomes that I think is coming, but it doesn't require you to read the tea leaves or have some vision of what the Federal Reserve is going to do and when it's coming. That's my own plan. That's what I'm trying to do with my money. Everybody's situation is different. Go through, watch this video, listen. Well, you've gotten here, so clearly you did. But check your own situation. Find out what makes more sense for you. I'm putting a bunch of links in the description for you to do your own homework. Again, the solution to ignorance is education. So go down this rabbit hole. Find out what's best for you. Be prepared for yourself and your family, because we're not helpless. That about does it for what I wanted to talk about in this episode. I appreciate you stopping by. But before we go, I want to reiterate, I don't want anybody to go out and buy a bunch of real estate right now, or gold, or even toothpaste on my account. Educate yourself. A lot of these videos are a little bit, it sounds like that we're powerless, and there is a huge power center that we need to get rid of. But we're not powerless. We're just not quite conscious yet. Ignorance can only be solved by education, and an informed person is much harder to rob and defraud. If you've enjoyed yourself and you've learned anything, I hope you'll hit that like and subscribe button. It really helps me out. But most importantly, share it with your friends. As we talked about earlier, education is the most important piece to this. It's up to us to talk to people to make them understand how they're being defrauded exactly. So share this with your friends. And if you'd like to support the channel, head on over to antitanktops.com. We've got some good items over there that I think you'll enjoy if you've been enjoying the channel. So go check it out. Until next time, this has been Econ and Decon signing out. Peace.